Well, hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this week's episode of The Formula, where we break down and explore the elements of achievement in world-class performers. I'm your host, Trevor Carlson. Now, when I say we break down and explore the elements of achievement, I mean that we sit down people from around the world and interview them around what experiences, failures, and routines have led to success in their professional or personal life today. This week's guest is singer-songwriter Anthony D'Amato. I had the opportunity to see Anthony play live at a house concert. It was a fundraiser for EMBARC, which helps Burmese refugees who have relocated to the United States, whether that's helping them get translators, helping them get work, all kinds of stuff. So it was a really awesome experience seeing Anthony play this show. His music is really moving and really cuts right to the bone, really, when you're listening to the message behind the lyrics. In this episode, we talk about how he got his start in his music career and who helped him along the way, how his previous jobs and work in the music industry prepared him for the success he's seeing right now, how he goes about his songwriting process, how relatability doesn't necessarily mean you're being generic, and really, we go all over the place. It was a really fun interview as Anthony brings a unique perspective to really how to get started in the music career, music field. So I hope that you take something away from this, whether you're an aspiring musician or somebody who just wants to get better at creating whatever your art form is. I know I learned a lot and I'll be applying some lessons from it. So let's get this interview started with Anthony D'Amato. On this week's episode of The Formula, I have singer-songwriter Anthony D'Amato. Anthony, I appreciate you taking the time to show up on the podcast today and sit down and chat with me about your music experiences. If you wouldn't mind kicking this off, can you share how you got started becoming a singer and songwriter?
Sure. I mean, I guess the answer depends on what you consider getting started. I mean, I got started playing music when I was a little kid. I was playing piano before I started going to school. I picked up guitar when I was a little older and started writing songs. In high school, I didn't start playing shows out in public as, under my own name until I was in college. And that was my first gig actually was there's an artist that I'm a huge fan of named Jesse Malin, who has been really inspirational to me, and a big part of the reason I got into songwriting in the first place. And Jesse owns a couple of bars in New York, and he was cool enough to give me my first gig at one of his bars, and he took me on one of my first tours in Europe, took me on some of my first real shows in the U.S. So, I feel like I owe him a lot for helping me get started. But even through college and then out of college, I was playing shows around New York and wherever I could get gigs, but still had a day job after school for a few years until I got signed to a record deal. And then I was able to leave the day job and start touring and recording and doing music full time.
Yeah. What was that process like when you went from, working a day job to getting signed by a label and being able to play music full time?
It was in some ways it was kind of seamless because the day job that I had, I worked as a publicist for other musicians. So I worked with St. Vincent and Bon Iver and Grizzly Bear and Bill Callahan and all sorts of cool artists on their album release campaigns and stuff. So and I picked that job specifically because I wanted to. I knew I wanted to be a musician. I didn't want to be a publicist with my life. But that was a job where working as a publicist, you're interacting with the artist, you're interacting with the journalist, you're interacting with the management and the label and the booking. Like you kind of see all the different aspects of how it all works. And you have this rotating cast of artists, because you're working 4, 5, 6 months on a campaign and, the next thing comes in. So I got to see so many different examples of what works, what doesn't work, what's a waste of time, what's a waste of energy, what's a waste of money. So I kind of, to me, I treated it just like being in school, studying up for when I'm in that position of putting out my record, here are the lessons I want to take from this artist, and here are the warnings I want to avoid from that artist. And the reason I say it was seamless was when I left, that same company ended up doing the press for my record. So I basically left my job on a Friday or something, and then the following Monday they started the campaign on my album. So I was, still in touch with the same people every day, but just kind of on the opposite side of that phone call and email thread.
Right. Do you feel like that experience working at that publicist as a publicist, do you feel like that really helped you to kind of understand how the process worked of getting the album out in a the most successful way possible?
For sure. I mean, I learned so much from that job, and there are some things after the fact that I always think it's better to know more than know less. Like, I know some artists that are just like, I don't want to have any idea what's going on the business side of things. Like, that's all gross to me, and I just want to do the art. And I totally respect that. But at the end of the day, I don't think, you can have the biggest cheerleaders on your team, but no one, and nor should they, will care about your art more than you do. So I think it's really important, and from my perspective anyway, to understand what's going on and all those business side of things. And I like to be really hands-on with that because, at the end of the day, like, it's my name on the CD, it's, my name on the concert ticket, and I want everything about it to be done in a way that I'm, fully behind.
That makes a lot of sense. So you have you're fairly hands-on with your brand then. So you make sure you kind of control what's delivered, or at least the quality that it's delivered at.
Yeah. And also just, the avenues that we pursue. I just want to, I like to think anyway that I have like a pretty clear vision when I finish, maybe while I'm working on it, I'm totally confused, but when I finish a record and it's time to come out or it's time to go on tour, I like to think that I have a pretty clear vision of like, this is what I'm trying to say with this album. And this is, how I think we should be reaching audiences with it. This is who I think we should be reaching with it. So yeah, like the music videos and stuff, I'm really hands-on with those. On the last record, I directed those and wrote them myself. On the record before that, I collaborated with some filmmaker friends from college, and we kind of wrote it and edited it together. So, everything down to the artwork and the posters and all that stuff, I like to be just very, very hands-on.
Yeah. What do you think the difference has been between, because you've released a few albums at this point, right?
Yeah, I've done a pair of records that came out on that label I was signed to. And before that, I released some music that I just kind of recorded in my bedroom and put out in the world itself. Yeah.
What do you feel like has been the difference between, maybe it's even by song, but your most popular, your most successful songs versus some others that haven't necessarily taken off for you?
I feel like, that's one of the things that you're always, trying to figure out, like what made this click and what didn't make that click is something on some level, I feel like I'm always still trying to figure out. But on another level, I also think that can be kind of dangerous of like, just because something clicked before doesn't mean you should just keep doing it over and over again and trying to recreate the same thing, because it doesn't really work like that. But I will say there's a song on that first studio record I did, The Shipwreck from the Shore. The song is called If It Don't Work Out, and that's a song that is from the minute I started playing it live, got such a strong reaction from people. And it's not an up tempo, not an upbeat song. It's not something you would think of as being like a radio track. It wasn't a single, but like that's the song that like Sirius XM picked up for radio play, and that's the one that Spotify added to playlists and stuff. And if I have to, there's nothing about that song that I would look at and say like, oh yeah, this is going to be the one that people latch onto or whatever. But if I have to think about it, it's probably because it's just a really honest, vulnerable song that I think, tackles or taps into something that a lot of people know and have experienced, but maybe just haven't verbalized in that way before. And I guess that's the goal of like any piece of art, right? Is to, give some kind of a voice to an emotion or a feeling that people have, but that they haven't quite figured out how to give voice to themselves yet.
Yeah, I've listened to that song before. As I was preparing for this podcast, I was listening to it a bunch, and it's a very real. I'm trying to remember the line that stood out to me. It was something about like you're like splitting up the stuff in an apartment or something like that.
Yeah. If it's the opening lines, if it don't work out, you take the bed and I'll take the couch.
Yeah.
And that's it came from a real a very real experience, which generally the best songs do, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I don't know. That's a song that people, at show after show, that's the one people want to come up and talk about or ask for.
Yeah. I mean, it stings to listen to. It's like, damn, I can relate to that. That's not a fun feeling.
But I was having a conversation with another songwriter the other day about that there is this feeling though of like, to me, writing a sad song isn't a sad thing, because it's like, here, I took this sadness and that hurt and whatever crummy emotions I was feeling, and I took them and turned them into something like, I created a song that, now it's on the radio and it helps me get shows places. And, there's some sort of like alchemy there of taking this negative experience, and then you take ownership of it and turn it into something that you can share with people, and it makes your life better.
Right. And I guess I wasn't saying that your song makes everyone feel bad when they listen to it, but it's just like, it's almost like I guess when you're singing it, maybe it just feels like you can read their mind or kind of like relive an experience for them that they've had. And they're just like, yeah, I totally get it. And I think that it's like at least when some of the more successful articles that I've written, when I'm writing from a place of like where something has been painful or maybe just like it's a very like single person audience, like this is how you do this. Or I think I just wrote an article. It was like, I just turned 30. So it was the 30 pieces of advice I would give my 18-ish year old self.
Uh-huh.
And there were some that were like kind of generic, but then there were some that were very pointed and direct. And all of a sudden I started getting all these messages, and they're like, man, that was so relatable and so good. I'm like, oh, I just wrote it to like the 18-year-old me, and I put it out there. And yeah.
That's the thing. I feel like sometimes in the quest to be relatable, people sometimes confuse that with being generic, or it's an issue I take, and not to be like a grumpy, crotchety person, but like a lot of like pop stuff on kind of mainstream radio is very like generic to me. Like, it sounds like it was written to fit in the background of as many different commercials as possible. And that's not the stuff that I feel like people relate to in the most intense ways. I think the more specific and real you are, the more, relatable it is to people. Even if you're like, man, this thing that I'm writing is so particular to this feeling that I had in this specific instance, the thing is, like, no matter how weird and strange you feel, there's like millions of other people out there who are just as weird and strange as you and have those exact same feelings. And I think when you tap into that and connect with them on that level, that means, you know, so much more than whatever kind of like just kind of bland, generic, like, this song will work in a commercial for Huggies and Toyota kind of vibe you do.
Yeah, I think a lot of people get caught up in there's not that many people out there that would like this, or there's only so many people, but it's something that has taken me a really long time to learn, and is like, if you just write to a very specific person or audience or whatever, something that's going to be extremely relatable to them, other people are going to also be able to relate to it slightly, maybe not quite as much as that core audience, but I think it also kind of sets it aside from anything else out there. Right.
And they also might not even relate to it in the way that you intended. Like the song might mean something very specific to you, and someone else might hear it and it means something very different but very specific to them, and that's totally cool. Like, that's another thing. People come up and say, like, oh, like, you know, this is my fiance and I, we had to use this song in our engagement or something, and in my mind it's like a sad breakup song that they're talking about, but to them it was like this sweet love song, and I'm, you know, more power to you. Like, I think that's the beauty of having things that are, you know, specific and grounded in your personal reality, is that, you know, other people can incorporate them into their own realities. Even if it's in a different light, it's still just as valid and can be really, you know, those connections, I think, are longer lasting than any other kinds.
Yeah. So when you sit down to write a song, is there someone in particular that you're typically writing to?
You know, I'm trying to do more of sitting down to write a song. My approach or writing technique has always been kind of that they just happen when they happen. You know, I'll pick up the guitar and play, and some days a song comes out, and then sometimes I'll go 3 or 4 weeks without having a single idea or something. But I'm trying to get more into the habit of making myself sit down and write every day, even if it sucks. Just write something, because you know, I think it's a good discipline to be in. And I think when I was making this new record that I've been recording out in Utah, I was really inspired by Joshua James, who was producing it. The dude writes like multiple songs every day. He's just a machine, you know, and I don't mean that in a like that they're all, you know, mass produced songs. Like, he just gets some kind of an inspiration, sits down and does it. And if he doesn't have the inspiration, he still sits down and does it till he has something. And that was just super inspiring to me. And he and I did some writing together, which I haven't really done much of. I'm not like a big co-writer historically, but we spent a couple of days just saying, like, we're not going to record anything. We're just going to write stuff. And we chased down a few different leads. And in the end, we had one song that we ended up co-writing that I absolutely love and is going to be on the record. And, you know, that was a function of sitting down and saying, like, we're going to write a song, which I've just always shied away from, because it feels like whenever I try to write something, it comes out kind of forced and clumsy. But the lesson I think I learned from this is that when we started it, it came out kind of forced and clumsy, but then we had something, and I spent the next day or two just refining it and editing it. And by the end, it was cool and I was psyched about it.
Yeah.
So your question about who I'm writing for, it's pretty much always me. You know, I'm writing because I want to try to make sense of something. I'm writing because I, want to work through something that's rattling around in my brain. And I'm also kind of my own harshest critic too, so if a lyric is still in a place where it makes me cringe a little bit to hear it, or I'm just not like, I don't know. I know when a song is not done yet, and that's where most of my songs sit until the very last possible minute. But when they get there, and it's a good feeling. So I don't, I try not to settle for anything, because I'm going to be the one that's pissed off about it later on.
Yeah. Do you ever have that feeling when you go back and listen to some of your old stuff and you hear something where you're like, oh, damn it. Where you feel like that you're like, that one word there, if I just would have switched it, or do you know the feeling I'm talking about?
Yeah, absolutely. I've especially like if I go back to something comes up and I'm playing an older song or listening to something that I made back when I was recording in my dorm room or something, and I'm just like, I didn't really know what I was doing then. But alternatively, I don't know if you have this, but there's sometimes when I go back to something that I've just like been avoiding, because I'm just like, I don't want to, and it's like, okay, I need to listen to this song and relearn it. And I'm like, oh, that was actually better than I remembered it. Like, why have I been like so self-conscious about this? Like, so it can go both ways, I think.
Yeah, I feel that way when I go back and I listen to my old episodes. Like in my mind, I and ahhed and said I think or something along those lines 100 times, and I go back and listen to it, and I'm like, actually that was okay. I'm like, I'm not upset about it. It was not bad.
Yeah, which is, I try to avoid, this is going to sound funny because I'm a recording artist. I try to avoid any situation where I have to hear the sound of my own voice, at least talking. But even like when we were listening to mixes and stuff in the studio, like I'd come out of the vocal booth and I hear it back. I'm like, that's what I sound like.
Oh
God, this is my least favorite. I'm probably not alone in this, but my least favorite thing to listen to is like my own unmixed vocals, like just after they've been made, before there's a little bit of, reverb and some EQ and stuff. Just the straight sound of raw vocals is just like, nails on a chalkboard.
So what you're saying is that never goes away? Is that what you're saying?
That, I don't think so. I mean, maybe if you're, Mick Jagger or Bruce Springsteen or something, maybe that you just have a badass voice, and no matter what you do, it's going to sound cool. But I don't know. I have a feeling that deep down inside everyone somewhere, there's a part of them that's just like, doesn't like the way they sound, doesn't like the way they talk, wants to, because you look at everyone else and just, you don't see or hear those voices inside of them that are critical. You just hear what's coming out, and it's like, that's cool. Like, that's cool. That's confident. Like, I would love to be like that. And they probably look and listen to you and see and hear, the same thing. Oh, sounds great. But in your head, you're just, no, they don't know what went into this,
Yeah, I'm always surprised. So I want to know how you feel about this, but I'm always really surprised when people they'll come up and they're like, man, I listened to this episode. It was awesome, man. That was great. And I'm like, yeah, thanks. And in the back of my head, I'm like, man, I kind of thought that one was a train wreck. And I'm kind of glad people like it, but I'm like, damn.
That happens all the time. I mean, I've artist friends and stuff too that, I'll go to their show and be like, man, that was amazing. And they're just like, that was the worst night of the tour. And I'm like, that was amazing. What are you talking about? That kicked ass. And then, but I also have to keep in mind that I do the same thing. Like, I come off stage after a show and I was inside my head for the whole show. So I know that I meant to sing something a little differently, or I know that, I didn't quite hit this note or that note that I intended to or whatever. But people out in the crowd just, it's like we were saying before, that they just feel the vibe a bit, the vibe and the honesty and the intensity of it or whatever. And so that's what matters to people, not that you were like technically perfect. It's just that like how you made them feel.
I think that's an important lesson. It's I think everybody makes mistakes no matter how long you've been doing it, but just remembering that maybe you're the only one that knows you're making the mistakes.
Right. And that the word mistake is maybe not even the appropriate way to think about it too. Like what's a mistake to you might be the favorite thing that happened in the song that night. Like I mentioned Springsteen before. I've been to see him, many, many times. And I feel like every time you see him, the songs are a little bit different. His vocal phrasing is different. And to me, that's cool. That's like, I'm getting this song and this moment from him. And this is what it is and what it means to him tonight. And I'm sure there are times in his head where he's, like, oh, we messed up. We didn't do that exactly the way I intended to tonight. But I don't care if he intended to do it the way he did it. Like how he did it was real and it was awesome and it was in the moment. And that's something I'm trying to get myself more in the headspace of when I'm performing, which is to be less concerned about being perfect and more concerned about being real and in the moment.
Is there a certain process or some things that you're doing to try to be more in the moment when you're on stage?
It's kind of like there's a word they use for like meditation and stuff. They talk about like mindfulness, and it's trying to turn off the thinking part of your brain and just tap into the observing part of your brain, right? So like the thinking part of your brain would be like making judgments about stuff, and the observing part of your brain is literally just absorbing what's around you. And I think those moments when you can turn off that thinking brain, which is saying stuff like, hope I don't mess up. Is that first person in the second row, are they on their phone right now? Like, are they paying attention? Did they get that last line was a joke? Are they taking it too seriously? Like that kind of thing. If you can turn off that brain and just absorb, like, I'm in this beautiful theater right now. I am in England playing songs I wrote and traveling around the countryside singing for, strangers, and just absorb being in that moment and how special that is. Like, those are the moments when you just kind of like smile and just sing the song.
Mm-hmm. It's almost as if you try to almost take a step back and just enjoy it for what it is, no matter what else is happening.
Yeah. The worst shows for me are the shows where I come off stage and realize I forgot to have fun. And that happens. Like I'll come off stage and be like, oh man, I didn't enjoy that. And not in that it was unpleasant or something, but just that I was so focused on like thinking it through, nailing this and that, not forgetting lyrics or whatever. Like, I don't know. I was those nights where you're just so inside your own head that you don't just accept and enjoy it. Those are the worst shows for me because, it's a missed opportunity to, enjoy what life is throwing your way.
That's an interesting point you made about when you get off the stage and you realize you didn't have fun. I wonder how many people out there listening right now can relate to that, where, they're doing something and they get done and then they look back and they're like, I don't understand why I didn't have, like, I should have been having fun, but I was letting these little things kind of steal from that moment.
Right. It's like, you go on vacation and you spend the whole time stressing about, falling behind at work, or, travel stuff, or problems with the hotel, or, car, whatever it is. I know I'm guilty of, or even on a micro scale, that you're out to dinner with your friend and you keep checking your phone, and it's like afterwards you're like, man, why did I do that? Like, there was nothing urgent that could have waited. I missed out on being present with this other human being, and who knows how much time we have ourselves and with each other. And it's just like, yeah, you can take those sorts of things for granted and forget to have fun or enjoy it, and then after the fact you realize, like, I just lived through this whole experience that I didn't really experience because I was like trying to get the right Instagram filter on my picture of it.
Yeah, I am not completely innocent of that, but
nobody is.
I'm at least, I feel like that when I sit down at dinner and I notice that I pull out my phone and I'm like, oh, like this wave of guilt hits me, because I do have that thought where I'm like, I don't know how many more dinners I have with this person, whether, life comes up, life happens, then maybe they get a promotion and move away. I should really be focused on this conversation, because it's, it's like you said, you don't know how much more time you have, and you never know what'll come out of that conversation or that experience if you're fully present versus like, thinking about something else the entire time.
Right. And, that was one of the things that I liked working with Joshua James out in his studio. It's, kind of built into the upstairs of his house. And he has this big painting on one of the walls. It's like a big kind of breaking wave, but I don't know if he did it or if the artist did it, but over top of it, just in big block letters, it just says, "Put down your phone." And it's just like, no matter where you are in the room, you can't miss it. And, I was certainly guilty of, looking at, the phone buzzes. What you got to see what's going on. It can wait. It can wait. At the end of the day, you can go through your emails, you can go through your phone calls or whatever. So yeah. And I that's not me trying to preach, because I'm as guilty of it as the next person. It's more me like trying to psych myself up into like, I want to be better about this. And I think it's cut from the same cloth of walking off stage and realizing you didn't have fun. I think that's one version of it, but I think literally everybody has some version of that, whether it's, dinner with a friend, or playing with your kids, or, just reading a book where you're just like, you finish the page and you're like, I didn't absorb a single word of that because my brain was somewhere else.
Yeah. I think it's also a great metaphor for life, because how many people do you think, get past a certain stage or, look back and then they're just like, I didn't do what I wanted to do, or I didn't enjoy myself in that, like, like I didn't enjoy myself in that moment that I look back on. Like, maybe you don't realize it right away. You look back and you're like, damn, that was actually a really good time. I think Macklemore has a really good song about this. It's called Good Old Days. It's like, I wish someone would have told me that those were going to be the good old days, or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so much easier to see that in hindsight.
Yeah. If there was only a way to do that in the present, maybe that should be a song that you come out with. And then when people listen to it, they'll be like, oh, all right, that's a good idea.
There's a song on that first record called Middle Ground. And there's a line, God, how does it go? There's a line in that song. God, I haven't sung that song in years, but there's a line about, that, we can't, you don't see the golden age until it's over,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's something I'll probably be thinking about the rest of today. Just like, how can I be enjoying these moments even more? Because I think about that. I know we're kind of going down a bit of a rabbit hole here, but I think about visiting my family They live in a small town, and I go back for the holidays and birthdays occasionally, stuff like that. And I don't really watch TV anymore. I do a lot of other stuff. When I go back there, it's just like we got 20 people in the room and no one's really talking that much, and the TV's on. And I get to see these people maybe like 2-3 times a year. And I'm just like, guys, can we just shut the TV off and just, because I would like to, personally, I'd like to, get to know some of my relatives more. I mean, I spent a lot of time with them as a kid, but as an adult, it's like a completely different relationship. It's like, you've been through all this shit before. What do I do?
Yeah.
So to everybody listening out there that, just flips on the TV when the family comes over, try turning it off, maybe having a conversation. And what was the line of that song that you said?
Man, I gotta like look up my own song lyrics. I don't know. Can I Google my own song lyrics?
Do it. No. That's perfectly acceptable. I'm just going to give you shit about it for the next couple times I talk to you.
I know. Oh, wow. There actually is a website that has all my song lyrics. Oh, okay, that's the line. In between the golden age and the grand decline, I wonder how we miss the good old days until they've been outnumbered.
Yeah, that's something to think about. Man, yeah. I'm going to think about that at least the rest of the day. I'll probably have to listen to the song now too. Was that your idea, is just to like plug as many songs as you could with great lyrics about being present?
Yeah, I'll just any topic you come up with, I'll bring up a song that's available for only 99 cents in the iTunes store.
That's a perfect plug. Yeah, go buy his album and each of the songs, and you might learn a few things about being more present. All right. So when you sit down to write a song, what does that process look like?
It's usually just kind of me playing a guitar and singing gibberish. I just try to find a melody. It won't be real words. It'll just be sounds. And then once I've got a melody I feel good about, sounds will start to turn into some words. Some kind of a vibe will start to emerge. I can tell what atmosphere I'm trying to create. And then once I have some anchor words and a melody, sometimes then it's good for me to just walk away from the guitar and just kind of focus on thinking about lyrics and what I'm trying to say. I write words well when I'm out walking. I could get that like rhythm, the motion of the tempo of the song in your gait, and then you're like physically embodying that movement and that speed, and it helps your brain kind of log. I realize this is a podcast, and I'm like making these motions that no one's
you're good. I can see him, so I get it.
Okay. But yeah, that's it, and it's different every time. Sometimes like a little phrase or a lyric will plan itself in my brain, and I'll write a song around that. But I think more often than not, it starts with some kind of a music and some kind of a melody, and then I figure out what the song is trying to say from there.
How long does that process usually take from when you get the melody down to when you feel like you have a song?
There are some songs on this new record that I've just kind of finished recording that I think there's one or two that I wrote in a day, start to finish. And then there's some that I've been sitting on for years, and I've had a melody and just no lyrics, Yeah. So there's not really a standard when it comes to that. It's just every single, some things click instantly. There's one song we recorded on here that I wrote a version of it. I wrote a song that I thought was going to be on my last record. It ended up not fitting vibe-wise, so we sat on it, and then, I brought it into the batch for this record. Still just didn't fit vibe-wise, but I loved the melody and the chord progression, so I just decided I was going to write completely new lyrics to it so that it would fit vibe-wise. And then I did that, and I thought those lyrics sucked. So I wrote a completely new set of lyrics, and I thought those lyrics also sucked. So I wrote a completely new set of lyrics, and the last set of lyrics, I felt good about. So that's a song that has existed probably in some form for 4 years at this point, but only now has it become what it is.
It sounds like things just kind of work out when I don't want to say when they're supposed to, but I guess when, you find the right pieces to put together, and sometimes those pieces aren't there right away, or they don't present themselves, or they aren't clear until a certain moment in time.
Yeah, but you know, kind of what I was saying before though too is that's the way I always treat it. Well, the song will come together when it comes together. It'll be natural. And what I've kind of, the mindset I've been trying to get into more lately is like, well, you know what? That song that I struggled with for years to figure out how it should go, like that song didn't reach its final form until I made myself sit down every day for a week and work on it. That songs come from wherever and they just sort of happen, but they don't just sort of happen if you're not holding the guitar in your hands or working on lyrics with a pen and some paper or something. Like songs don't just come if you're, scrolling through Instagram.
All right. Yeah.
So, I mean, I have gotten song ideas from weird things I've seen posted on social media. Sometimes you see a picture that makes you feel a certain way and you're like, oh, that's a cool image. I want to work on a song. So inspiration can come from wherever. I'm not trying to say like your phone is bad, don't ever look. But what I'm trying to get more into the headspace of is not waiting around for inspiration. Maybe that's my takeaway here. Don't wait for a song to come to you, or if you're writing something or painting something, like, go to it versus hoping it might just show up at your doorstep.
Yeah. What you're saying reminds me a little bit of a book I read a few years ago that pretty much changed how I approached writing and making things in general. And it's a book called Bird by Bird by Annie Lamott. You ever heard of that?
No.
Yeah, so she has a few interesting concepts in there. One's just like the rule of shitty first drafts. So like just sit down and just write like the biggest piece of shit that you can, but just get it out and then keep working on it, and all of a sudden it won't be shitty anymore. But the hardest part that she shares is just like sitting down and accepting the fact, like just getting over the fact that your first time through this is gonna suck. Right.
Because that's like embarrassing to actually write down song lyrics that suck. It makes you feel bad about yourself. So it's easier to just not do it, right? But the thing is, once you write those bad song lyrics, then you have a place to start to make them better. And every time you go through, you make them a little bit better until, lo and behold, none of the lyrics you started with are left. Only better ones are, but you couldn't have gotten to those better ones if you didn't start with the shitty ones.
Yeah, it's a good lesson for just about whatever you're doing. I mean, you just gotta kind of get started and just kind of live with the embarrassment a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, you don't have to show anybody your shitty song lyrics. Nobody's gonna, I'll tell you that they exist, but I'm not gonna share them with you.
Yeah. I have notebooks full of shitty ideas and terrible articles that I've written that I will never, ever show anyone.
That would actually be like a cool website or a podcast or something, like Shitty First Drafts, like to find like talk to artists and authors and songwriters and painters, whatever, and get them to share their like shitty first drafts of like things that turned out great.
Yeah, or like rejected draft that you like stuff that you submitted and people were just like, "This is terrible. You need to go start over," or something. Yeah,
there is like a Twitter or a blog or something that shares famous rejection letters to famous people. I forget what it's called exactly, but they have like the record label exec saying like while while this music you sent me from the band you represent, U2, sounds promising, like, I don't think that they're exactly what we're looking for at the moment, and we're going to have to like that sort of thing. And it's like, you look at it now and you're like, what kind of a moron passed on signing U2? But then you also remember, like, okay, well, U2 got passed on, like, they didn't quit.
Yeah. You just kind of have to keep going.
Exactly.
Yeah. So I'm sure that while you're touring and you meet a lot of people while you're out, probably a lot of other musicians, and I'm sure you get the question a lot, Anthony, I want to be a full-time musician. I want to be a professional musician. What do I do? How do I get started? What do you tell them?
It's like kind of what we were talking about just now is how do you get started is you just start, you don't wait for permission or someone to tell you it's okay to make a record. Don't tell you, that it's okay for you to go play shows. Just start doing it, and it's going to suck and it's going to be lame and you're not going to be good, but that's how everybody starts. Nobody comes out fully formed or whatever. So, and the longer you wait to start, the longer it takes you to get to where you're headed. So yeah, my advice to anybody in that position is to, and granted, I'm just one person and I'm by no means some sort of pinnacle of success, wealthy rock and roll star here to tell you how to, live your fantasy dreams like me. I'm getting by a day at a time and I'm still figuring it out myself. But I do know that I wouldn't have been able to leave my day job and start, doing music full time the way I have been, if I didn't before that start playing shows while I had a day job. And if before that I didn't start recording in my bedroom in college. And if I didn't start, reaching out to other songwriters I liked and trying to pick their brains about how they write and how music works and stuff. So yeah, I mean, it sounds sarcastic or snarky or something, but it's not. Like, how do you get started is you just start, just do it.
Yeah. And then, once you get started, it's like record songs on like if you have to use your iPhone, record your songs on that, research other artists and see how they write and how they record and do those types of things. And then it's maybe find some local shows or some coffee shops that'll let you play. And then once you get past that, then it's, now you have like enough songs to do like an album or something. And then look at quitting your day job if you're good then. Does that sound about right?
I think there's this like this fiction that people have that, I can't, well, I'd like to make a record, but I don't have fancy equipment or I don't have a budget for a big studio and I would need to work with this famous producer or whatever. Like, there's this record I've been falling in love with lately and listening to a bunch. And I was just reading about it. And the guy recorded it. He set up like a microphone facing the wall in his bathroom. And he had the computer in the other room. So he would like press record and then run into the bathroom and like sit down in the tub and perform the song because it was just like great reverb and acoustics in this tiled bathroom. And that's how he made the record. And it's like, again, tying back into what we were talking about at the beginning. Yeah, maybe those aren't like technically perfect sonic documents, but they sound cool to me, and I believe them, and I have been listening to it like crazy. So I don't even know what we were just talking about. Oh, we were talking about just going for it. Yeah, you don't need, whatever. Work with what you have and start there. And yeah, don't wait for some unknown date in the future when you'll be, allowed to do it.
Yeah. It's like, as soon as this thing happens, then I will start. It's like, well, I hate to tell you, but who knows if that thing, that whatever you're waiting for to happen, will ever happen. It's just like, start today, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. So you do a lot of touring, and you know, some of my friends down in Mexico were telling me how good of a time they had while you're playing your shows down there. What's your favorite story to tell over dinner when it comes to, you know, you being on tour?
Man, that's a good question. I don't know if I have like you know, one favorite story. It's, you know, I tour solo so much. I don't live the like debaucherous Led Zeppelin lifestyle on the road. I'm also broke, so it's pretty bare bones, minimalist life on the road. But you know, what I like to do to kind of keep sane out there, like the last big tour I was on, it was 2 full months in Europe playing on my own, and that was an amazing, life-changing experience to you know, drive around the entire continent, basically playing all these shows and meeting so many amazing people. But when I'm on the road, the way I try to keep myself with it and not going nuts is I bring a camera with me, and I do a lot of photography while I'm traveling. I love animals, so I like try to go to like zoos or like wildlife places and stuff when I'm on the road. So like this last tour in Sweden, I went to this like moose preserve where they let me like feed these giant moose, which was just, you know, amazing to me. And in another place in Sweden, I went to this place called Tropicariat, which is like this crazy indoor zoo that just would not be allowed in America, because like the monkeys and the lemurs are just loose. Like you just walk in, they're just walking around inside you and stuff.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to think of other weird animal encounters. When I was in Australia at the Taronga Zoo, zoos are like my off day activity. So I was in Sydney and I went to the Taronga Zoo, and I read they have this thing where like for an extra like $50 or something, you can get brought inside the penguin enclosure, and like a keeper will train you how to like properly feed the penguins, and it's you. And you know, they say we keep it to a select group of people. It's only, you know, 5 or 6 people are allowed to do this every day or whatever. So I sign up and I, you know, give them my $50 and I get up there, and the lady's like, this has never happened before, but you're the only person today. So she brought me in, and I was just covered in penguins. Like I'm holding this little fish, and the penguins are crawling all over me. And every time they take a bite, they would sneeze because they swallow it whole. Like they don't have teeth, they don't chew. So they take the fish and then just throw it back in their mouth and swallow it and then sneeze. So my pants are covered in penguin snot. And that was like the best day of my life. So
that sounds like an awesome day. Which zoo did you say that was at?
I was at the Taronga Zoo in Sydney. But I go to zoos all over. That's my thing. I've been to the London Zoo, the San Diego Zoo, the zoo in DC. Gosh, where else? I'm at Columbus, just wherever I can on an off day. You know, if there's like a zoo or an animal park or something, that's my thing.
Yeah. That sounds like a pretty good hobby though. I've been to a few zoos, definitely not as many as you. And there's some exhibits or things where I'm just shocked. Like I'm thinking of one, they had this, it's like this butterfly enclosure type of thing where you walk through and there's these like giant butterflies. They'll just come and land on you, and they're like, don't touch the butterflies. And they're like, this thing that's 8 inches long is just sitting on my shoulder, 3 inches from my face. It's pretty awesome.
I went to one of those when I played a show in St. Louis last month, and I had a free like afternoon before the gig, and it was like just outside St. Louis. It was a town called Chesterfield, and I read they have like a big butterfly conservatory. So it's like wherever I go, I try to look up something to go do and photograph or experience in that town. So
yeah, next time you're in the Midwest, if you haven't been to the zoo in Omaha, it's like the Henry Dorley Zoo or something like that. I think that they have some really interesting exhibits. Last time I was there, they were still under construction, but that's where the butterfly one was. And then they were working on like this huge, like, I don't know what you call it, like African safari type thing, where they had like basically just have all these safari type animals that are just running around in the open. So it's pretty cool.
Right on. I'm into that.
Awesome. Well, I think that kind of wraps up this for this part of the show. So I just have a couple, like 3 questions that I ask every guest.
Yeah.
So the first, all right. So the first one is, what do you try to do on a daily basis that you feel like gives you an edge on the day?
That is a good and loaded question. You know, I live in Brooklyn, and I feel like if there's one thing that I do on a daily basis in New York, it's just walk. There's a lot of walking in this city, and I don't know that I feel like it gives me a particular edge or something, but the days that I don't get out and just walk around and see all the different people and everything that's happening and swirling around me in this town, the days that I stay cooped up working on mixes all day like I am today, those are the days when I feel like crummy.
Yeah.
You know, those are the days when I don't feel like I'm sharp and with it. And, you know, those are the days where like, what am I doing? But the days when and maybe this is a sign that I just need to like make that a thing, and just first thing in the morning, like get up and go out and just, there's a whole amazing world going on. And in New York, it's like the entire world is compressed into, you know, a couple of square miles, and to just go out and just make yourself be a part of humanity, I think is a good thing for every human being to do at least once a day.
Right. And I definitely agree with that, because I have a habit of, you know, I drive down to the office or co-working space I work out of, and then there's a few coffee shops within like a block or two, maybe 3 blocks. And I'll just walk over to one of them and, you know, grab a coffee. And it's not even about the coffee half the time, because I have coffee here. It's just more about like, I walk in there and I'll see, you know, a few people I know, and I just feel like my day starts out a lot better for some reason. Yeah. I can't quite explain it, but I feel like I can relate to what you're saying.
I mean, we're meant to be social creatures.
Yeah. And I got this awesome message on my coffee cup today. I do some rock climbing with one of the owners of the local coffee shop, and he's got a bunch of younger daughters that are baristas there, and one of them always writes or says these like super cheesy motivational quotes like, "You're the best, go be awesome today." And even though it's really cheesy, it always like makes me like walk out of there with a smile. I'm gonna have to look up what she said today, because she wrote something on my cup and she's like, "You can't look at it yet, you have to wait."
Oh, nice.
And I get back to work and I like slide the thing down, and it's I'll tell you what it says in a second. It's just like, you know, maybe they should just write these on every cup, because it made me feel like I was gonna have a really good day today.
That's awesome.
So the quote said, "Be creative, be unique, and be the best you, because you are amazing." And I was just like, damn, put that on a poster I can hang up next to my desk or something.
Yeah, it's just nice to get those little reminders every now and then.
Yeah, absolutely. So next question, what's the most impactful book that you think you've read? And if you don't have a book, because I know some musicians have like a song or something, so either book or song that was most impactful for you.
You know, the answer to that probably depends on the day of the week. But based on the conversation we've been having today, there's a book that jumps to mind that was recommended to me a while ago, and I read it and have since like gotten it for other people because I feel like it was such a useful thing for me. It's a book called The Happiness Trap, and I'm really not one for like motivational self-help kind of like, because I feel like, I don't know, I've tried to read some of those things before and just been like, this is dumb. But this book, The Happiness Trap, I really, it's like I keep it on my phone, and I go back to it on tour fairly frequently, because it's just a lot of, techniques for, not the ways that we can make ourselves. It's kind of about the ways that we make ourselves unhappy by trying to be happy so hard, rather than just by being present and accepting moments for what they are. We have this way of saying, well, if it was like, how many times you've been like, oh man, someone's like, oh, it's nice out. Like, yeah, if it was, I wish it was 10 degrees warmer or 5 degrees warmer. It'd be like, just little things like that, where you're just, it's like, no, this is how things are. Like, don't sit there and infect it with negativity by saying, well, what if it was this, or if only it was this. Just like, this is what it is. Enjoy it. And so the book has a lot of things that I've found useful as somebody who deals with a lot of like anxiety and stress and, negative thoughts. It's like the thing I love most about it that's been useful to me is this kind of technique of when those basically it's a technique they call cognitive diffusion. So the idea is, when you have thoughts, right, you just believe them inherently, just because you thought it. It came from your head, like it must be true, right? If you're like, I'm not doing great at this, there you go. That's your reality. But the point of this is not to like try to fight those thoughts, and not to try to like say, to say, no, I am doing fine, or like not to, or try to not have those thoughts, is to just accept that they exist. And it's just, your thoughts are just stories that your brain is telling you. And in the same way that like, if Sean Hannity came on Fox News and said, Donald Trump just shit gold or something, you'd be like, okay, great. Sure thing, Sean. You wouldn't say, well, oh, he said it, so it must be true. So it's kind of about learning to, accept that sometimes your brain has Fox News on in the background, and you don't have to listen to it. You can say like, oh, Fox News is on again, but you don't have to be like, well, they said it, so it must be what actually happened.
Yeah, you broke that down in like the best way possible, because it's like, I fall into that trap, and I've, especially recently, because I have a ton of I have a bunch of product releases and stuff going on. So I'm just like, when you have a thing that's about to come out that you've been working on for a while, you're like, okay, let's hope it's good. And you have all those thoughts come up in your head, and then you're like, shit, it must be true, because I just thought it. Like, right. Oh, damn. And then it like snowballs into more anxiety. But if you frame it as, if someone else tells you something, you probably second guess it a little bit. So why don't you just be like, okay, well, that's just my, that other station in my head talking, and I got this. So,
and I have spent so much time trying to fight those kinds of thoughts, where either you like argue with them in your head and try to convince yourself that that thought isn't true, or where you try to, you beat yourself up for having those thoughts or try to stop them from happening. And this book was the first one that was like, yeah, you're going to have those thoughts no matter what. And guess what? If you try to argue with it, you're just thinking about it more. So rather than fight it, just say like, the story about, me, the story about my product launch being a failure. Oh, it's that story again. Great. All right, cool. That story's on. We'll let that play in the background while I continue working on my product launch, because, it's just a story, and I'm sure another story is going to come up tomorrow.
Right. That's great advice. And I'm going to try to remember that within the coming weeks.
And next time you have that thought of like, oh man, I suck at this, just be like, if Sean Hannity came on Fox and said, you suck at this, Trevor, you'd be like, all right, great. Sure, Sean Hannity.
Yeah, I would probably be thinking of some 4-letter words towards him at that point. I'd be like, yeah. Watch me. Anyways, before we go down that rabbit hole, the last question.
Make this political, but
you're good.
Sometimes.
So last question I have is, I asked this for all the guests, but what message would you like to leave the audience today?
There's the crass commercial message of, to check out the music and see if I'm coming to your town, and buy a ticket or download a song or something, and see if it's if this conversation spoke to you. Then I think the music would speak to you too. And then there's the more inspirational. What I leave folks with is, I feel like we talked about a lot of inspirational kind of stuff today, but just the idea of like, don't wait for somebody to tell you that it's okay to do what you want to do. I mean, obviously, if like it's illegal or something, that's a whole different can of worms. But if there's something in the back of your mind that you really, an artistic thing you really want to pursue, or something creative, or something with your job, like you can waste a whole lot of your life waiting for somebody to tell you that it's okay. And I think the sooner you start headed in the direction that you want to go, the sooner you can, get to places that excite you.
Yeah. And I can vouch for Anthony's shows. I've been to one. It was a house concert and it was awesome. So if he comes to your neck of the woods, make sure and go check him out.
Yeah. I know.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, that is a wrap for this week's show. Thank you for tuning in to this week's episode of The Formula. Now, if you'd like to find any of Anthony's music, go ahead and check him out on Spotify. Just search for Anthony D'Amato, or check out the show notes to find a link directly to his page. Now, if you think you'd like, or you think would enjoy getting more pieces of content from us, whether that's more podcasts, blog articles, online classes, whatever it might be, go ahead and head over to helixacademy.co and sign up for our newsletter. Now that's all for this week's show. My name is Trevor Carlson, and I look forward to you tuning in next time. This episode of The Formula was produced by Helix Academy, and the music was provided by the artist known as Moods. Make sure and check him out on Facebook or Spotify. That's MOODS.